Welcome everyone to the Over Under Movies podcast show where we take a prominent figure of franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He is the Buzz Lightyear to my Woody, or the Woody to my Buzz Lightyear. I don't know. We both have qualities of both characters. It's Mr. Jason Gong. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk about this topic, and I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, man. We have not talked much this week, despite the fact that
we ostensibly live together.
We live together. We definitely live together. We share. We may or may not share a bathroom together.
Yeah.
I have not seen you all week, so.
Well, I was out of town from Sunday to Tuesday,
and I have a job.
Yeah.
That has pretty late-ish hours. I have like 3 hours to myself every day now with these like 10-hour work days that I do in the summer. It's not great.
I know. When you come home, you pretty much go to your room and I don't know, work on your other content. So yeah, I just haven't seen you.
Anyway, the big movie that is out in theaters right now is Inside Out 2, the sequel to Inside Out 1, which is, of course, made by Pixar Studios, one of the most legendary animation studios ever. And honestly, neither of us have very strong opinions of the first Inside Out movie.
No. Say the joke you said yesterday on the...
What was the joke? I don't even remember the joke.
It was a really classic bit. It was, you said, I don't really have any strong feelings about Inside Out.
Oh, that was not intentionally a joke.
It was hilarious. That's the type of humor that you're going to get on this podcast today. Dylan was being super funny.
The best type of humor, unintentional humor. Anyway, we're just doing a top 5 list. We're keeping it simple here. No overrated, underrated, shtick for this one. Just a top 5 list of our top 5 favorite Pixar films of all time. I actually don't have the full list in front of me, like how many films they've done. I guess they've done like, 20-something films at this point?
Yeah, I can pull that up.
So the first Toy Story came out in 1995. That was their first feature. They had done some short films before. I know the lamp that we see as like their mascot in the opening crawl of their logo is from a short film that they did before they started doing like their regular movies. I forget the lamp's name. Somebody, feel free to put it in the comments. Just some quick history here on Pixar Studios while Jason's looking up their movie list here. Pixar was officially started in 1979. It kind of branched off from Lucasfilm. It was part of the computer wing of Lucasfilm. So there was Industrial Light and Magic, which is the visual effects studio. There was another like computer studio in Lucasfilm that eventually branched off into Pixar. Then there was this guy named Steve Jobs who became like an angel investor for Pixar in the 80s. And he really put a lot of money into it, eventually becoming like a majority shareholder in the company. And that's when they really started like pushing more into doing animation and film. Going into the 90s, most films were 2D animation. A lot of them were still hand-drawn, and then they were animated, on the best computers that they could get in the late 80s into the 90s. But once we started getting films like Toy Story, we started getting a lot more of the 3D animation that we now basically see everywhere in animated film. So Pixar was really a pioneer in that regard. And what's interesting about this studio particularly is that it's a studio that it almost feels like it's peaked already. Yeah. Pixar was officially acquired by Disney in 2006. So it'll be interesting to see how many of the films on our top 5 list here are from 2006 onward versus prior to 2006. I know that it's kind of like a common thing now to like trash on Pixar, to be like their best ideas go to Disney now, and Disney will just release the good Pixar ideas as regular Disney films instead of as Pixar films. I think they've had some good stuff recently, but we'll talk about it as we go through it. As we go through our top 5 list here, we'll do it how we've done our previous list pods. So if I have something at number 5 and it's at your number 2, we'll talk about it when we get to your number 2.
Yeah, so Dylan and I both have top 5 lists. We don't know each other's top 5. So that'll hopefully generate some interesting conversation, although we have pretty similar tastes.
Yeah, how much overlap do you think is going to be in these lists?
I would say a good amount.
Do you think there's going to be 3 movies that are the exact same on these lists?
I think there will be 3 movies that are shared between lists. Maybe not at the same rank, but probably.
Okay. How many Pixar films are there?
I think there's 29.
29, wow.
I was just counting, so I don't know if that's an exact number.
Incredible.
29 is a lot.
That is a lot of movies since 1995, so almost 30 years. It's basically a movie a year.
Yeah, it's impressive.
So what is your top your number 5?
At number 5, I have Toy Story, and that's kind of there just representing the Toy Story franchise.
The original Toy Story.
Yeah, I'm going with Toy Story. So I assume you have a different Toy Story on your list?
No, I have the first Toy Story. It's higher on my list, though.
Okay, all right. We'll talk about it then.
So we'll talk about my number 5 then, I guess, which I'm guessing is not on your list. And that's Coco.
Coco is good.
I love Coco.
I should rewatch Coco.
Coco is super underrated. It came out in 2017, directed by Lee Unkrittel. The director is one of those guys, and I'm going to be talking about this like the whole pod with my list, is that Pixar just kind of pulls their own people for directors, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
With some like notable exceptions, obviously. They basically they grab the same directors that are also just like employees of Pixar.
Right.
That they'll have do their movies. So like the brain trust in there, like they keep it all in house. They're not bringing on like hotshot like writer directors or somebody like that to come in and do their animated projects, which I think is really interesting. Coco is the story about Miguel, who his family has banned music because their grandmother was shunned by this super famous musician named Ernesto de la Cruz. And through a series of unfortunate events, during the Day of the Dead, he ends up in the land of the dead, where he can meet like his like ancestors, and he runs into Ernesto de la Cruz, who is an incredible villain character. My list is just loaded with movies that have really good villain characters.
Sure.
There's just something about the heart and soul of this movie that I thought was really touching to me. This movie also has one of like the hardest scenes of my life to watch without crying, which is the scene at the very end when the grandmother is like singing along the song. I watched it like twice in theaters because I think I saw it with my sister one time. And I remember like the second time I knew it was coming. There's nothing I could do about it.
You still cried? Yeah, I think I teared up during that as well. That is one of the stronger, like, emotional Pixar movies, I would say. It's a great movie. Yeah, honestly, it's a contender for top 5 for me, too. It just didn't make the cut.
Yeah, and that's one of those, like, recent Pixar films.
Yeah, 2017, you said?
Yeah. I thought it was more recent than that. I was looking at some of the other ones. I'll just, like, expose myself here and say, like, I haven't seen Encanto. I haven't seen Luca.
I haven't seen... Since Disney Plus came out, I have not watched a Pixar movie.
Yeah. How many other films have just gone straight to Disney Plus? I know Inside Out 2 is getting a wide release now. I mean, how soon do you think Inside Out 2 will be on Disney Plus?
Probably like 3 months, maybe less.
No, it'll be less than that.
All right. So the straight to Disney Plus, did Onward get released in theaters?
I don't even know what that
March
is.
6th. 2020. So if it was released in theaters, it was a bad time to release in theaters. Okay, it has a box office number, so it was released in theaters. So then Soul, Luca, and Turning Red are the 3 that were released during the pandemic, so straight to Disney Plus.
Coco is also the highest grossing film that's on my list, which it had a $200 million budget. It made $814 million at the box office.
It's good.
It did quadruple its budget. Anyway, what's your number 4?
Number 4, I have Ratatouille.
Ratatouille is not on my list.
Great. So this is like a lot of people's favorite Pixar movie. It's like really beautiful. It's really unique. I think it's really cool that it kind of blends, human elements with like Pixar's talking animals, making things sentient that usually aren't. But yeah, it's got a really inspiring message that anyone can cook. It's just like such a funny premise that a rat or a mouse or whatever he is just puppeteering a French man. That's hilarious right off the bat. And then I think it does a good job. You know how people, when they talk about like Miyazaki movies and they're like, oh, the food looks so good.
Yeah, I want to eat it right off the screen.
Yeah. Well, what Miyazaki does for Japanese cuisine, I think this movie kind of does for French cuisine. And really, like, all the food in that movie looks good. Even if it's just like a piece of cheese, I'm like, damn, I want to eat that. I understand why. I even understand the rats, like when they're going through the garbage. I'm like, some of that garbage food looks good too. You know me, I love to eat, and this is like a food that's all centered around that, and it's great. I do think it's a little bit underrated. I think hardcore Pixar fans tend to rank this very high, but most people don't. But it's great. And interestingly, this is one where I would say they did bring in an outside guy. It's a Brad Bird directed film.
One of 2 Pixar films that he's directed. The other one probably on this list again. We'll talk about it.
Probably. But he's a great director. He had all hits in his career up till this point, until he did Tomorrowland a couple years later. But
can't get them all.
Legendary director, worked on The Simpsons for a little bit, I think. Just like he did The Iron Giant, and you know, bringing in someone like that.
He did Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Yeah. Which some people say is like, it turns...
Ghost Protocol slaps. That's the one with the Burj Khalifa scene where he's hanging out the fucking Burj Khalifa.
It's crazy. And that scene lasts so long. But yeah, this movie is like a love letter to food and cooking and trying to like be the best version of yourself. And I find it inspiring.
Yeah, it's a good movie for like people. It's a movie about people being passionate for something.
Yes.
And you can see it in The Rat, and you can see it in... Well, the rat's name is Remy. What's the chef's name?
I think it's Linguini.
Linguini. Incredible name.
Yeah, already hilarious. Like top to bottom, this movie is like built to be funny and touching and succeeds on all the levels. So
yeah,
that's great.
And Linguini, he nabs the baddie at the end, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, good for him.
I might rewatch that tonight.
Has there been fan art created of a Ratatouille the Bear crossover? Is there two
probably
like
almost definitely
shows?
Yeah.
Have you played Kingdom Hearts 3?
Yeah.
In Kingdom Hearts 3, for anybody that doesn't know, because that's the first one that like basically they could have Pixar films in Kingdom Hearts. There is like a food/potion system that you can like level up your character with to make him stronger. And it's entirely Ratatouille minigames.
That's hilarious.
Where you're cooking foods. And all the foods in Kingdom Hearts 3 look incredible. They're like real French dishes that you can cook up. And Sora is being piloted by Remy. He's like pulling his hair.
That's so good. I don't think I ever played that minigame, but I might go back and do that.
Anyway, my number 4 is a film called Wall-E in 2008.
I have that higher on my list.
You have it higher on your list. Cool. So I'll go to my number 3, which is Toy Story. I have the first Toy Story. Do you have any other Toy Stories on your list?
No. Do you?
I do not. No. Okay. So so we both agree that the first Toy Story is like the definitive Toy Story.
I kind of have it. I mean, it's the one I've watched the most, and I'm kind of using it to represent the franchise. But yeah, I do think I like it the best by a little bit.
How are you ranking the 4 Toy Stories that have been released? There's been 4 of them, right?
Yeah. As of now, I think they're working on 5.
They're working on 5.
Terrible.
So the worst one is Toy Story 4.
Yeah. So I would go, the best is 1, and then maybe 3, but 2 is really good too. I don't know. It's almost a 3-way tie between the original 3 Toy Stories, and then 4 is...
Now, the first 3, it's a trilogy that is just like, it's like Lord of the Rings. It's like banger, banger, banger.
Yeah, exactly.
And they all have really good parts of it. The thing, like, Toy Story 2 has a lot of like really great sequences that like really stick with you. The one that just immediately comes to my head is the entire sequence of the toy maker repairing Woody.
Yeah.
And his like entire kit that he pulls out.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it's so well crafted, and the animation is just fucking incredible.
Yeah, especially for that time. It looks amazing.
But there's something about the first Toy Story. I was, when I was doing my brief research before this podcast here, I was reading like the early scripting of Toy Story, because this was the first Pixar film. It was the first movie, the first feature that they did in 1995. So we were like really young kids when this came out. The original script for this film had like a Tin Man toy and like a wind-up dummy, and they were supposed to be like rogue toys basically that run into each other at a gas station, and they go on an adventure and they end up at like a kindergarten with like a bunch of other toys. They completely rewrote the script to make it so that the 2 toys that are meant to work together are like butting heads early in the film, and then through a series of events they're forced to work together, and that's how they become friends. And I think it's crafted perfectly. I think the dynamic between Woody and Buzz is like really awesome in the first one, and you don't see as much of them like butting heads with each other in the later films,
right?
Which I feel like they could have like come back around to that. But one of the things that I always like tie Toy Story with is that it almost feels like a story about getting a younger sibling.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah,
because Woody is like the favorite toy, and he's always used to getting all the attention, and then Buzz shows up, and now Buzz is getting all the attention, and that's something that I'm the oldest of 4 children, sure. And like anytime you get a younger sibling, the younger sibling now is the one that's getting all the attention, and you're not getting it anymore. So that's just one. It's an element. I'm not sure if that's intended in the script, but that's always something that kind of like resonated with me going back and watching Toy Story.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting lens. I agree with you. I think that the Woody Buzz dynamic being at the forefront is probably what puts this as the best Toy Story for me.
And everything at Sid's house at the end is great with like the demon toys.
Yeah, it's a great sequence. And then them trying to catch up to the moving truck.
Pizza Planet. Like you watch the Pizza Planet scene as a kid, and you're like, I want to go to Pizza Planet right fucking now.
So, Pixar is good at making me want to eat food
and play arcade games.
Yeah. Woody and Buzz together, it's like a perfect duo. It really feels like a buddy movie or even like a buddy cop type of movie.
Yeah.
And then that does kind of fall off by the second one, and then the third one, and then in the fourth one, Buzz isn't really in the movie that much.
Yeah, that's the problem that they have in the later films, is that Buzz and Woody are the main characters, and because of that, you kind of like want to split them off from each other. It's an issue that like a lot of movie series have, where you have several protagonists that you want to focus on. Like the way to like script it is you just split them up and have them go on like they're each like separate adventures, and they can come together at the end.
Right.
But yeah, the first Toy Story is great. I think it holds up like perfectly, and the animation is like a little dated. If you watch like Toy Story 3 and Toy Story 4's animation compared to the first one, it's definitely noticeable, but like holy shit, it looks good for 1995. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, they were innovating, leading the way. Yeah, Toy Story really is good. Like it's a lot of people's favorite, but I don't think it's in any way overrated.
Yeah, and they also ushered in something that is now just commonplace in animated films, but like getting like legit celebrities to voice the main characters, which something that Disney would often do is they would get professional voice actors and they would get professional like vocalists to do the music. That's something that Pixar, like they were clearly focused on getting big names. Tom Hanks and Tim Allen were like big stars in the mid 90s, and they were like, we're going to get these two guys to voice our main characters for this Pixar film. And it's something they've kind of gotten away from a little bit with their more recent stuff, but like my list is just kind of like loaded here with movies that have like all-star voice casts, and that seemed to be the thing when Pixar was really at their peak.
Yeah, it's the same with my list. Everyone who was a lead in these movies was a famous live-action actor.
Also, speaking of budget to box office, $30 million budget for Toy Story 1 made $400 million at the box office.
Great returns.
Like that success alone probably paid for like their next like 10 movies. Like it gave them the clout to be like, we could just print money with these things.
I think so. And then the merchandising off that movie was insane too. I had a sleeping bag with Woody and Buzz on it. I had a Buzz Lightyear action figure. I was really about Toy Story as like a kid.
Yeah, Toy Story is great. The Kingdom Hearts 3 level of Toy Story is also really good.
It's so funny because at one point Woody confronts the Organization 13 villain and he's like, I bet you've never had any friends before, have you?
And it's funny that is the ultimate meme that came out of that game, is the whole up, let him cook. Which that is not what Woody is doing in that cutscene.
Yeah, the original is honestly funnier than the meme because he's just roasting a dude.
It is funny that I think it's Tom Hanks' brother does the voice of Woody in all of like the alternate media that aren't like the main movies.
Yep.
So in Kingdom Hearts 3, it's Tom Hanks' brother, who sounds exactly like him.
Yep, it's great.
Doing the voice of Woody. All right, so is WALL-E at your number 2?
Yes, but my number 3, because you went from your 4.
Oh, did I go to my number? I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. What's your number 3?
The Incredibles.
That's higher on my list.
Great. I'll go to my number 2, which is WALL-E.
Okay, let's talk about WALL-E.
WALL-E's great, and maybe it might be the only one on this list that doesn't feature super prominent actors because it's mostly silent.
No, that's the really interesting thing about WALL-E, is that it's so dissimilar to all the other Pixar films.
Yeah.
It features a protagonist that has no spoken lines of dialogue. Well, he's a robot with no voice.
He says Eve.
And he says WALL-E.
Yeah. He says his own name and he says his girlfriend's name.
Yeah, he's like a Pokemon.
Yeah, exactly. WALL-E is almost a silent film. Eventually they introduce human characters that do speak, but most of the emotionality of the film, most of the humor is a silent film style. I believe I heard on an interview that when they were working on this, they watched like Charlie Chaplin movies and they were like, we're going to make a robot version of Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah, I'm sure that Denis Villeneuve and George Miller fucking love WALL-E.
Yeah, no dialogue, baby. But it's a very charming film, even though there's no dialogue and, most of us are geared towards dialogue. It's perfectly clear what's going on. They're able to convey so many thoughts and emotions just through music and motion, And I find it really beautiful. That's why it's at my number 2. It's like, it's so incredibly unique. And then, of course, there's the biblical allegory side of it.
What is the biblical allegory of WALL-E, Jason?
Well, you sent me a tweet that said WALL-E is the story of Genesis.
It's the story of Genesis.
And that the AI ship is God and Eve is Eve. And WALL-E
is Satan?
is Satan. Yeah. But it's got like environmental themes, but mostly it's just about like 2 robots falling in love, and it's really nice.
Well, this is a post-apocalypse movie. We're kind of burying the lead a little bit here.
That's true. So yeah, the plot of the movie is that WALL-E is like the last sentient thing on Earth, and he's a trash compactor robot. So he takes trash and turns it into cubes. And then he meets Eve, who's from this cruise ship in outer space, and he follows her. And then we find that there are survivors of whatever this apocalypse was. It's people who took a cruise to outer space, and now they're all morbidly obese. They're all like spoon-fed their information, entertainment, and food from like this AI system that controls the starship.
Oh my God, it's prescient.
Yeah. And basically, WALL-E and Eve have to figure out a way to get these people and then restore Earth. And it's just a lovely little movie.
I remember when I was a kid that the scene where the ship goes like off axis and all the fat people just start sliding down the ship. Hilarious.
Do you have any other thoughts about WALL-E?
I just think it's cool, and it's a movie that I think is very topical to nowadays because of the technological aspect of it, the AI, environmentalism, obesity crisis, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's good, and I'm a big fan of movies that are more visual than dialogue heavy as well. And I think it's such a unique take, and it's a film that is not as kid centric as a lot of the other Pixar films. I mean, that's always been the major thing that has separated Pixar from other animation studios, is that their films, while still being children's films, have they're really good at grabbing an adult audience and having themes that adults can appreciate. And I think WALL-E kind of like skews more in the adult direction than like any other film that they've done.
Yeah. So there's like this story about how 4 or something of the top guys at Pixar just went to a cafe one day and they were like, we're going to plan our next 7 movies. And that included like A Bug's Life, I think, Monsters, Inc., maybe even Finding Nemo. But the last one that they came up with was the concept of WALL-E. So they came up with it like at least a decade before WALL-E actually came out. And I think they drew a little picture of just like a stupid little box robot on a napkin. And that's where the idea came from.
Yeah, because the guy that directed WALL-E, his name's Andrew Stanton, and he's another Pixar guy. Mm-hmm. And he directed Finding Nemo. He was one of the writers on Toy Story. He also directed Disney's John Carter film, which is
interesting.
Which is unfortunate. Another situation where don't do live action stuff away from Pixar, my guy. Just stick to what you know.
Poor guy. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yes, I have.
Is it bad?
It is bad.
Damn. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is Monsters Incorporated.
Okay, I have that higher.
Dude, wow, let's go.
So, do you want to talk about The Incredibles or Monsters Incorporated?
Okay, so The Incredibles is my number 1, so we can talk about Incredibles now.
Okay.
Incredibles came out in 2004. It was directed by Brad Bird, as we talked about before. This is like straight up, this is a Brad Bird movie. He's a writer-director. They like brought him in. He had this idea for a superhero family. I guess you're more of the comic book guy here. Is there like any good examples like this in comic books where it's a superhero family and they all have like different superpowers and stuff like that?
Yeah, the Fantastic Four is
probably the closest.
Yeah. So they're called Marvel's first family, and you can see that the Incredibles almost have the exact same power lineup. But yeah, the Fantastic Four is a guy, and then his girlfriend, and his girlfriend's brother, and then their best friend, the Thing. So it's not like a nuclear family, but it is a family.
So The Incredibles takes place in a world where superheroes exist. However, there has been like a law that was passed by the government that outlaws superheroes. Mm-hmm. So they're all in hiding. So Mr. Incredible is retired, and his wife, who she was Elastigirl, she's also retired. She's a stay-at-home mom. He has like an office job that he fucking hates.
Mm-hmm. He works for insurance.
Yeah.
And he has to deny people's claims.
And there is a person that gets in contact with him saying, we need you to help us like stop this like threat on an island. And he goes to the island, and it's a trap by this guy who is jealous of superheroes and is trying to like kill them off one by one. It's a really dark storyline compared to like other Pixar stuff. Like he's legitimately murdering all of these superheroes with this giant robot.
Yeah, you see at one point Bob, Mr. Incredible, goes through this computer that shows all of the superheroes who have been killed to train this robot. And then I think there's a part of the movie where you see Bob and Helen get married, and everyone that is listed as deceased on that computer was guests at their wedding. So it's really sad.
Yeah, it's very tough. But then his family basically has to go do like a rescue mission for him, and it's great. It's just really good superhero action. It's a really, really strong story. I like that they made the villain of the film like a fanboy. He doesn't have superpowers, and he wants to be Mr. Incredible's sidekick, but Mr. Incredible shuns him. So he goes, you know what? I'm just going to murder superheroes. Fuck them. Yeah,
it's dark. And yeah, Syndrome is a really iconic supervillain. Probably the best to come out of Pixar. He's so interesting. And, he's kind of got this, it's that thing where the supervillain kind of has a point where he's like, well, these people have superpowers, but if I make everyone have superpowers because he's going to sell his inventions, then these people won't be special anymore and we'll all be equal, which is an interesting idea. This movie packs a lot of like philosophy into it for a Pixar film. I've seen people call it like an Ayn Rand type of story, because it's about how people who are born excellent should not have to hide that, which is a very Randian belief. But I think it's just really cool. It conveys a lot of themes and it's just interesting. And it's an awesome superhero movie at the same time. It might be like one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that it kind of like transcends just being a Pixar film into like the greater superhero genre, which there's no shortage of superhero movies out there right now to compare this to. And it holds up.
Yeah.
Just straight up. Like if you're making a list of the top 10 greatest superhero films of all time, Incredibles has to be on that list somewhere.
Yeah, I would say so. I think The Incredibles is the first Pixar movie where humans are the main characters, because they do toys, bugs, monsters.
Yeah, they do cars, they do fish.
Yeah. So this was like kind of a leap. Like I think they had to not rely on sort of that cutesy element of like, what if the toys were alive, or what if cars could talk? They had to like actually make a human story with humans, which was probably outside their wheelhouse at the time.
Yeah, they do a really good job at it. Do you like Incredibles 2?
I like it. It's not in my top 5.
No. Incredibles 2 was such a disappointment for me. It's also directed by Brad Bird. I just thought it was okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And which was just like very, very disappointing when I came out of the theater. I was like, they really just didn't have like a second story they could like think of.
Yeah, it's interesting because that really just feels like just another superhero adventure, like the first Incredibles feels like Watchmen, where it's a superhero story that changes the game, and you just know it's an instant masterpiece. And then the second Incredibles is just like a random issue of any comic book.
Yeah. Do you know what the highest grossing Pixar film of all time is?
I want to say Cars 3.
It is Incredibles 2.
Really?
Incredibles 2 is the number 5 highest grossing animated film of all time.
Good for them.
It made $1.24 billion at the box office.
Wow. They disappointed a lot of people then, but they made their money.
That's crazy, isn't it?
That's good, because Brad Bird, I guess the guy kind of fell off with Tomorrowland and didn't come back in terms of quality with Incredibles 2, but he did make that money.
I'm sure they'll make an Incredibles 3 at some point.
At some point. I mean, we can talk about that news too. They just said that like, oh, we're going to focus more on sequels.
They're like, we do not have ideas.
Yeah, they need to go back to that cafe and get their napkins and start drawing shit again.
Yeah, I'm sure they got cafes out in LA. They got good ones.
Probably.
Not cheap, but good.
Yeah, not cheap. I bet the place where they had that Pixar meeting is like so jacked up in prices now. I bet people like go there just to sit at that booth. We should do that.
Okay. So your number one's Monsters Inc.
Yeah, dude, Monsters Inc. slaps. So
we have four. We both have Incredibles, Monsters Inc., Toy Story, and WALL-E on our list.
So yeah, you went with Coco. I went with Ratatouille.
Coco.
What a great list.
I just real quick, some honorable mentions.
Yeah,
some good ones. Finding Nemo's good. Finding Nemo almost made it to my list.
Finding Nemo's good. I think Finding Nemo's a little overrated, but it is still
it's iconic.
An awesome movie.
It made everyone want to buy a clownfish. The clownfish became like an S-tier fish immediately.
Yeah.
All the aquariums had to load up.
Honorable mentions, Toy Stories 2 and 3. Really easy honorable mentions. Great movies.
I really like A Bug's Life. A Bug's Life kind of gets like lost in the sauce a little bit.
It definitely does. It's not my favorite. Like it wouldn't crack my top 7 probably, but it is a good movie. Do you like the second one?
Which do you like better, A Bug's Life or Ants? On which side of that do you fall on?
You know, I had a different podcast. It was called Twin Peaks, but Peaks was spelled Peeks. And it was about films that had the same premise that came out the same year. And there's like a surprising amount of these films.
Yeah, it happens a good bit in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's a thing.
Yeah. So me and Dan, who you can watch on our Furiosa episode, we recorded a podcast where we watched Ants and A Bug's Life and talked about it. I don't know where that recording is. And also, Dan says some pretty problematic things, so it's probably good that it's lost. But A Bug's Life is a lot better than Ants. Ants is okay, but it's got Woody Allen.
Yeah, Ants is weird. It's a weird movie.
It's so weird. It's so weird.
And the ants are like jacked.
Yeah, except for Woody Allen. Which is a really funny concept to have like these jacked ants and then one shrimpy little ant that's voiced by Woody Allen. But A Bug's Life is cool. That movie is kind of an homage to The Magnificent Seven, that cowboy movie, which is an homage to the Seven Samurai, which is the samurai movie. It's about a guy who has to defend a town, and so he goes out and recruits 6 people.
Yeah. He recruits an arbitrary amount of individuals.
And in this case, he recruits from a circus of different types of bugs. I don't know. We're going really deep into Bug's Life for something that's not our mention, but yeah, it's good. And it's better than Ants. But yeah, check out my Twin Peaks podcast when that comes out.
Yeah, well, we'll find it somewhere. It's on Jason's hard drive.
Other honorable mentions. I guess like my favorite of the new stuff that I've seen, I haven't seen like almost any of these. So Onward, Soul, Luca, I did not see, but I did catch Turning Red on an airplane, and I was like, this is pretty good. They should have released this in theaters.
Did you like the first Inside Out?
I guess it would be somewhere in my top 10, but it's not that great.
I think it's one of those movies that cool idea, and then you watch it and you go, okay.
Yeah, it was fine.
Like they clearly had like an idea for a plot to pull off of that, but it kind of just becomes, it almost becomes what the original script of Toy Story was going to be, where they just like take 2 characters and they send them like on an adventure to kind of, become friends with each other and become comrades. And they have this idea for the emotions inside a person's head. And I don't know, it feels like a concept for like a short film.
Right.
That they tried to like turn into a feature, and on paper and like maybe in like a movie trailer, it looks cool because the looks of each of the individual emotions are pretty well fleshed out.
Yeah, and they got an all-star cast of people who really kind of fit the emotion that they were playing. Like Amy Poehler as Joy was really good. Mindy Kaling as Disgust is a really funny pull. They weren't able to get like half the cast back for Inside Out too.
Yeah, so they must have been like really strict on like negotiations for salaries or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, but Inside Out, I think Pixar has gotten really good at knowing how to, I don't know how to say this in like a way that makes it not sound bad, but like emotionally manipulate an audience. Like they're very good at knowing exactly how to tug at heartstrings. But like it felt like they really applied it as a science in Inside Out. so it didn't really work for me as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how many of their more recent movies specifically target adolescents. I know that like Turning Red, that's like the entire plot of that as well.
Right.
It's something that we see throughout the Toy Story franchise, is that as Andy's getting older, he is not playing with his toys as much, and the trickle-down effect that has on the toys not being played with anymore. And then, yeah, Inside Out it takes place inside of the head of a teenage girl, who is obviously going through an emotional transformation on her own. And I'm guessing that's extending into the Inside Out too, which will probably be even more extreme emotions coming through.
I remember I saw Inside Out, and I had just gone through a breakup recently, but I watched the movie, and I think I teared up a little bit when she was crying, and she was crying in front of the class. And then I was hanging out with my ex, and she was like, I hated Inside Out. Did you cry during it? And I said, yeah, I cried a little. And she said, you're such a bitch. And she said, all that girl did was move cities, and she moved to a cool city.
She moved to San Francisco.
Yeah. My ex was like, people move all the time. That's not something you should cry at, and you should feel bad about crying at Inside Out. And ever since I had that conversation, you know, she wasn't nice about it, but she was right. Inside Out, kind of overrated.
Yeah, I mean, what's the girl's name? Like Riley? Yeah, I mean, her dad is probably like a software engineer at Google or something like that, making $120,000. Like, she's good.
Yeah, we don't need to feel sorry for her, or
she plays hockey, right? You know how much money you need to be able to finance a child to play youth hockey?
I've never thought about that.
It's a lot of equipment.
Yeah, you're right.
It's one of those like rich people sports, because like the barrier of entry to get your kid like all the stuff that they need to play hockey. And to even have like a hockey rink in your town. Funny enough, we had a hockey rink in our town.
Yeah, where we grew up, we had that luck. I don't think I took advantage of it enough. Did you?
No, it's fucking dangerous, man. I can't ice skate.
I mean, when CN Skate Palace is right there, which it's not anymore.
Yeah, we had a rollerblading rink.
Right, hold on. Let's cut that. Let's not dox where we're from.
Dox CN Skate Palace.
To your point about the adolescence, I think that's really interesting, because I assume Luca is about that. There's still a good mix. Like Soul is about an adult who dies, so that's not about adolescence. But a lot of the stuff that's our favorites, like The Incredibles, is about a guy having a midlife crisis. Monsters Inc.
Wonder why we like that so much.
Monsters Inc. is like a workplace comedy. Like a lot of the stuff that really resonated with us is not the coming of age stories, but the other stuff, which I find interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about Monsters, Inc. It was my number 2. It was your number 1. So this was not like my big movie when I was a kid. It came out in 2001.
It's competing with Shrek.
Yeah, my brother Nick, he was a millennial baby, so he's turning 24 this year. His favorite movie was Monsters, Inc. He fucking loved Monsters, Inc. It was the movie for him that I'm sure everyone can relate to this, that he made us watch this movie every single day. He woke up and said, Mom, put on Monsters, Inc. And then he woke up the next day, Mom, put on Monsters, Inc. For me, that was Aladdin. Sorry, Mom. We'll have to do Aladdin on a pod at some point.
Yeah, we should.
Do you know what was the movie that you forced your parents to watch a million times?
The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. You can check out our episode. It came out last week by the time this comes out.
But yeah, I've seen Monsters, Inc. maybe more times than any other film ever.
My sister put on the first Harry Potter a lot, which I liked, and she also put on a movie called Barbie as Rapunzel, which I think really slaps. Actually, I think we might have to do that for an episode. Yeah,
you kind of get like a level of Stockholm syndrome when it comes to movies that you're forced to watch.
And you're like, wow, Barbie as Rapunzel is really good. I can't believe she has a purple dragon as her best friend.
Yeah, they get seared into like the deep memory centers of your brain where they can never leave.
Yeah, and it's good. You know, it's good to have that in there.
But like you said, Monsters, Inc., it's like a workplace comedy.
Yeah.
And it's about these two guys that are homies.
Yeah, and they learn to be fathers together.
It's really great. I really like Jonathan Goodman as Sully. He's like the all-star scare person. So they work in this world.
Yeah.
This world where electricity comes from the screams of children from a parallel universe. which is fucking incredible as a concept.
It's so crazy. And they came up with this just sitting in a cafe. I think that's why it's my favorite. It's just the premise alone.
It is
insane.
A very, very outlandish premise.
So good.
That just works on every level. And Mike Wazowski and Sully, they work at the factory, the scare factory, where they need to get... They felt these pods for electricity.
Yeah.
And then Sully, his main rival scarer, his name is Randall, and he's played by Steve Buscemi, right?
Yep.
And he's just a weird, like, little slimy... He's like a salamander monster.
How bad do you feel for anyone who's named Randall now? Because the two prominent Randalls I can think of are that slimy, scaly monster and then the snitch from Recess.
Yeah, it's a bad name.
That's so unfortunate. It probably used to be so dignified.
And then you have the leader of... the guy that runs the company. His name is Water Noose, and he's like a crab monster.
Oh, yeah. I guess I thought he was a spider, but I guess he...
Yeah, he's like crab legs.
Yeah, he does have crab legs.
And then Roz, who is like a giant slug, who is the secretary. Yeah. It doesn't feel like putting up with anybody's shit. And then Mike dates Celia, is that her name?
Yeah,
she's like
remembering this really well. Yeah,
squid lady right off the rip. Again, deep memory centers. Monsters Inc. also has a really great Kingdom Hearts 3 level.
Yeah, and that one has a cool redesign for Sora, Donald, and Goofy too.
I really like the aesthetic of the doors. That the main floor where they're harvesting the screams of children is they have to pull in the doors. That when you activate the door, you can enter the parallel universe. And there's tons of like unique ways that they, mess with the doors throughout the film, notably to like trap characters in the parallel universe in which they have to try to escape. It's just a cool setup. I really like the Hazard crew, their yellow suits. That was it, the 2319.
Yeah.
When the monster gets a sock on him, and then they have to do a complete like chemical clean of him and shave him.
Yeah. So in this world, they believe that the human world is toxic and poisonous to monsters. That's why they have to be like in and out when they're doing their scares, which is also an interesting like little bit of world building.
Yeah, the lore behind this world is so like well designed.
And it's such a simple premise, but then everything they did to expand it just like makes sense. Like it's something that probably was a hard pitch when they came up with it at the cafe and then had to go back to their investors and be like, all right, what if we do a movie about scaring children, but it's for children? And then they had to explain everything about Monsters, Inc. I bet it was tough.
Yeah, and what's interesting, I mean, the core plot of the film is a little girl, Boo. She ends up in the monster world, and they don't realize that she's like in the monster world until everything's closed up. And the entire plot of the movie basically is to get her back to her like real like house, and her connecting with Mike and Sully, and eventually like they don't want to let her leave. And the very end of this movie is like horribly tear jerking. It is like one of the hardest watches of my fucking life.
I think I'm gonna watch that tonight.
When Sully has to say goodbye to Boo.
It's tough, yeah.
And I'm like, sweet Jesus. I told you like how many times I've seen this movie. It's like it is tear inducing every single time I watch it. I have to like look away. It's awful.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch that. So I watched Monsters University today to prep for this podcast.
I've not seen Monsters University.
Really?
I've heard that it's kind of like Incredibles 2. Like it's okay.
Yeah, it's not very good. I would have just waited. I would have said we could watch that tonight. But no, I don't want to watch it twice in one day. No, Monsters U, I was interested in your thoughts on it because it's a pretty big fall off, but it expands that world in interesting ways. And it's more Mike Wazowski focused, whereas Monsters Inc. is kind of more of a Sully story. So you get to learn more about that character. And then, I don't know, they do a lot of like campus comedy type stuff. Like what's that famous one? National Lampoon's Animal House. Like they riff a lot on that type of thing. And it just doesn't really work. But there are funny aspects to it, and Randall's in it. And it's just kind of nice to see them again. If they were to make a sequel or another prequel to Monsters, Inc., what would you like to see in it?
You'd have to bring Boo back.
Yeah.
You'd have to bring like a teenage Boo into it. It's her trying to get back to the monster world because, she remembers it fondly, and maybe like her friends don't believe her or something like that the monsters exist. And so it's her trying to reconnect with Sully and Mike. I feel like that's the only story you could go with that would make sense to me.
Yeah, so originally when they were thinking up Monsters U, they were going to do a sequel, and it was going to be Mike and Sully get trapped in the human world and Boo as a teenager.
Yeah, I don't know if you could just do like the inverse like that. I don't think it works the same.
I mean, they scrapped it, which is probably for the best, but I don't know. I would like to see something like that. I think if they were to do a prequel, I don't think they should have done Monsters U. I think they should have done a prequel set like 1,000 years before with the first monsters, whoever figured out the door technology.
And the origin story of Monsters, Inc.
Yeah, and like figuring out that screams, it's a story about discovering electricity, basically. But I think it would be really cool to follow two completely different monsters doing that.
Well, because the big twist is that they find out that laughter from children is way more energy efficient than screams.
Yeah.
They can produce way more energy from making them laugh. So all the monsters turn into like clowns.
They're stand-up comedians. Yeah. It's so good. And it's great because, Mike becomes the new scarer. Originally, he's kind of like Sully's helper coach. But then they do the inverse when they start doing laughs. And Mike does a stand-up routine and completely bombs. So he has to pull out the big guns, which is eating his microphone and then burping, which makes the kid laugh. It's so funny. But this movie is really interesting. Like, it's a workplace comedy. It's about, two friends shepherding a kid around. There's a couple movies that could be like its own genre. But then there's also like elements of not necessarily corporate espionage, but like...
Yeah, it's a movie about corporate greed.
Yeah. Waternoose turns out to be the villain. He says he'd kidnap 1,000 children before he lets his company die. And yeah, you see these kind of like Mad Men-esque power plays in a workplace, and it's cool. It's just really cool. There's a lot in this movie to love. I love it so much. It's so funny.
Yeah, maybe we'll watch that tonight. But that is our top 5 lists. So just to recap, my 5 was Coco. Number 4 is WALL-E. Number 3 is Toy Story. Number 2 was Monsters, Inc. Number 1 was Incredibles. Jason, what was your list?
Mine was Toy Story, Ratatouille, The Incredibles, WALL-E, and Monsters, Inc.
Yeah.
I had nothing later than 2008.
So next time we do a top 5 list, we'll talk about it beforehand so we don't have 4 of the same movies.
That was funny. Also, it saved us time.
So let us know in the comments for sure. What is your top 5 Pixar films? Are you excited for Inside Out 2, which is now in theaters? Are you going to see it when it's in theaters, or probably wait till...
No, I'll go see it since I pay for A-List.
That is true. We do have A-List.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode of the Over Under Podcast. Make sure you check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. We release new episodes every Monday. Our Patreon subs get our episodes on Sundays, so definitely sub to our Patreon. You also get your name at the end credits of every episode. Also join our Discord so we can talk about movies with you. We have a Letterboxd bot integration in our Discord, so you can always see what movies we're watching, so you can know exactly what episodes are coming out before they come out.
You can see,
because you'll see it on our Letterboxd.
I talked about Monsters University today. Yeah.
But anyway, that's going to do it for myself. For Jason, we'll see you next week on the Over Under Movie Podcast. We'll see you at the movies. Bye.
Bye.